Hi there, Malcolm here with my 130th Booktube video, and today I'll be bringing you my July wrap-up and August TBR. Now I managed 19 titles last month, so there's quite a stack, so let's get cracking. First up was Berserk by Michael Grant. I really enjoyed the Gone series, at least the base Gone series. The sequel bit was a bit rubbish, but quite fancy reading something else by him, and so got Berserk. This one is all to do with nanotechnology and a hidden war down at the macroscopic level, or I think that's what it's supposed to have been about. Actually, the story was rather vague, the plot quite meandering. It followed a couple of kids who were going to get enlisted and trained up to use microbots to do something as a threat to attack the president's brain, but it really got lost in I don't quite know what. It sort of didn't really do much for a lot of it. Some of the visuals when we're down in the micro were really good. Face to face with the flea and other parasitic organisms was really cool. I went into it with high expectations, having enjoyed Gone, but it didn't really deliver. I'm intrigued enough to go into book 2, but it did sort of do lots of the standard tropes. The big bad has a James Bond-esque physical condition, not what I hoped for, and I don't think it knew what it was trying to go for either. Worth reading, I suppose. After that, I then read Saltier Invasion. This is a graphic novel we've had on our shelves for quite a while. It's billed as being Scotland's first superhero, with all the Scots mythology in there. So I thought I'd give it a go. Visually, it was very nice. Good, clean artwork. You can clearly see what's going on. Nicely drawn. Can't fault the artwork. Story, there's no real story. It's an origin story, I suppose, though the story is really stretching the term quite a bit. As this guy comes into being, and well, that's pretty much it really. Pages and pages of let's build this world, here's the lore, info dump, and more. We go to somewhere else and do another thing and get a sword, I think. I'm already forgetting a lot of it because it didn't really happen in the first place. Disappointed. There was Romans at the end to fight, but then we had a whole bunch of other heroes that suddenly popped up from somewhere and was like, who the hell are these guys? And do I care? No, not really. I really wanted to like this one, but found it rather boring, to be honest. And after that, I then read 28 Days Later, Aftermath. This goes in with a film of the same name, but without Aftermath. Somewhat unnecessarily, I think. It's a bit of a prequel to the film. It's just, what were they doing with those monkeys? Why did they create this virus? So we follow the scientists creating it in the first place, and then we follow a family as the end of the world happens, and it's a sort of standard zombie apocalypse type story. But we follow this family as one by one they get bumped off or survive, depending on the bit you get to. It's more of a series of short stories which have this family loosely attached to it in some capacity in each bit. And it was a nice ride while it lasted, but I don't know if it really adds much to the world of 28 Days Later. The artwork was nice and clear. It starts nice and bright at the beginning. Once it all goes down, we get much grittier and darker artwork. There's slightly different styles between each story as well, but they're pretty similar, so it's not too disjointed between each story, but definitely worth reading. Next up, I read a few Asterix books. Now, for those who don't know, Asterix is a ghoulish warrior in 50 BC, where the Romans have invaded and conquered all of Gaul, except for one tiny village on the coast, because they have a druid called Getafix, who is able to brew a magic potion which makes them all invulnerable and can fight back the invading forces. I read these when I was growing up and absolutely loved them and wanted to reapproach them again and to see, do I still appreciate them? I also wanted to read them in chronological order. Doesn't say on this book, but in the top corner of the books I had, they have a book number. So this one claims to be book 15. Actually, this is book 2. And it confused the hell out of me when I was reading them when I was younger. I didn't have things like the internet to look up and find out just what the reading order was supposed to be. It turns out that the numbers on the front of the books meant what order they've been translated from French into English, like we really needed to know that, rather than the chronological order that they were supposed to have been done in. Now, I knew this was the first book because despite the nice introductory thing telling you who the characters are and what they look like, on the very next page, the very early first panels ever drawn feature the characters not quite looking like the characters that they were told that they are. As is usual with any long-running comic strip, it takes a little while for the artists to really pin down the look of the characters. And so I understood that. I knew that this was the first book because the characters didn't quite look like what they were. And on top of that, this first book, Astrix the Gaul, as an introductory book, I felt initially was perhaps a little weak on the ground, You know, it's very sort of, you are this, of this, and this is how you fit into the story. But actually this is a much more in-depth story with a great adventure where Getafix the druid is kidnapped by the Romans and Astrix has to go and rescue him. But it's really, really funny. Lots of kidnapping in this series. And so his first book introduces Obelix, who doesn't go on the adventure, strangely enough. He just hangs around at home. Obelix fell into a cauldron of magic potion when he was a baby, and it's had a permanent effect on him, so he never needs to drink it. He's always tough. He's not particularly bright, but he does enjoy thumping Romans and eating a lot. He's also a miniature delivery man, as one is. Introduces Asterix, obviously, Getafix, Vital Statistics, the village chief, who doesn't quite look right, but he's definitely him. Cacophonics the Bard, whose singing is so atrocious no one can bear it. And interestingly enough, Fully Automatics, the village's blacksmith, whose Cacophonics' biggest critic, and he normally tells them such with his fists. However, he doesn't look like the final version of himself until much, much later on in the series. So, going into it again, I was really surprised at how many characters had already been established at this point, even if they didn't necessarily look like who they were supposed to be. And there was a lot of fun to be had. There's going to be universal funny Asterix book, I'm going to wave at you, but booktastic. So after book 1 is book 2, and definitely not book 15 as it claims. Now, Asterix and Obelix go on their first proper adventure together, but again centred around Getafix, who breaks his magic golden sickle, with which he cuts mistletoe, which he uses in his potions, and so they have to travel to a nearby town to buy a new one, and of course there's a golden sickle shortage. Try to say that 5 times fast. More great stuff. Booktastic. I'm going to try and whiz through these because there's quite a lot of them. So book 2 is then followed by book 3, and not book 5, Asterix and the Goths, where inhabitants of the neighbouring country that becomes Germany cross the border and kidnap Getafix because they want his powers so they can control their own country, and Asterix and Obelix go over and rescue him. Now these books are full of great puns, as you may have told by some of the names. Asterix and Obelix, as in things you use as footnotes in a story. Cacophonics as a terrible sound and he's a bad singer. All that sort of thing. All the Gauls have a Ix at the end of the name, whereas the Goths have an Ick. So you have characters such as General Electric and Metric and so on and so forth. Also great puns and great wordplay. And interestingly enough, as these were originally written in French, these had to be translated, where a lot of the French puns were obviously lost, but kudos to the translators, because the English versions that they came up with instead and the wordplay that they use instead of the French wordplay is genius, absolute genius. Books are worth reading just for that alone. So more great fun, but this time in the land of the Goths. Booktastic. So book 3 is followed by book 4, not book 6, Asterix the Gladiator. Another kidnapping, this time and Cacophonics is kidnapped as a present to Julius Caesar, and his fate is to be fed to the lions in the circus, and so Asterix and Obelix go to rescue him and end up having to become gladiators in order to get close enough to get to him. One thing noteworthy about this book is how they took a bloodthirsty and pretty gruesome blood sport that is, of what takes place in the gladiatorial ring, and made it suitable for all readers to enjoy and appreciate. You know, the threat's not gone, but what they do with it is perfect. So booktastic. 2 noteworthy things about this volume is that it introduces the character of Geriatrix. He's not named, but he's there as a little gag. When Obelix goes off, he leaves his miniature delivery service to a decrepit old man who becomes known as Geriatrix later on. So it's a one-cell gag, but they use that character design later on for Geriatrix. And they come across the pirates for the very first time. Their very first sinking, one of many, many. And then after that is Asterix and the Banquet. It is possibly one of the most important books in the series in that it introduces the character of Dogmatics. There's anything more to be said about this book apart from that? Yes, actually. They do a trawl around Gaul, or France, going to the various regions, picking up different foodstuffs to prove that they can. The Romans have barricaded the Gauls inside the village, and they made a bet with the chief Roman to say, we can get out and get around Gaul before you can stop us, and we'll prove it by getting the foods from all the regions. And so that's what this book is about. And one of the first places they stop at, little Dogmatics is sitting outside, just watching the world go by. He takes a liking to these two, and he follows them for the rest of the book, completely unnoticed, until right at the end when he barks and is given a bone. He was supposed to be a one-off gag for this book, but became a fan favourite and a dominating presence ever since. My knowledge of France isn't great, but I am told that they have actually pinned down all the different regions very, very nicely, whether it's the people, the foods, the culture, or the architecture. each region has a good flavour of what it is. Booktastic. Annoyingly though, my copy never has had the middle pages, so the story jumps from page 22 to 27. I've never seen what happens in between until I read this one again and looked it up online and managed to find the missing pages on an online comic reading thing. I'm going to have to pick up a new copy with those missing pages in it. And next up, I've already lost track of what number it's supposed to be, but Asterix and Cleopatra. No kidnapping this one, where the Gauls and Getafix are asked to help out a Egyptian architect to help build Cleopatra's palace, as she has a bet on with Julius Caesar, just to prove that Egypt is still with the times and can still get things done. Unfortunately, the architect is completely useless. And just because the characters speak with hieroglyphics in Egypt doesn't mean the puns stop. There's some great visual puns using hieroglyphics in this one. It's also noteworthy in that fully automatics actually looks a bit more like himself in this one. Booktastic. And after that, Asterix and the Big Fight, where Obelix inadvertently brains Getafix, trying to rescue him from being kidnapped again, and as such he's lost his mind and is no longer able to produce the potion that protects the village. Chief Asterix is then challenged to a duel by another chief who's in league with the Romans, and there's a race to try and find the cure for Getafix, while also preparing Asterix to fight fair for change. This has long been one of my favourite ones. I love the slapstick comedy of Obelix flattening people with miniers and of the mishaps using the random potions that the befuddled Getafix creates. So I do love this one. So booktastic again, but it does annoy me that the other druid that they brought in to help heal Getafix, Psychoanalytics, is also given a hefty blow by Obelix's minier, as depicted on the front cover here. Also loses his marbles and creates strange concoctions with his cauldron. But when Getafix's boiler cured, surprise, surprise, they don't bother cure him. He goes back to his practice as slightly dotty. And that always bothered me. It's like, well, why didn't they make him better as well? Anyway, after that, I then read Asterix in Britain. I would wave it at you, but the boys have borrowed it and put it somewhere. I can't find it. As well as having perhaps one of the more faithful adaptations to the big screen, this one is another absolute classic, where, like with Asterix in Egypt, the Gauls are called this time to Britain to help out, and there's a similar village to theirs which is holding out against the Roman invasion, not because of any magic potion, they're just not giving in, but there's only so long they can hold out, and so they send Anticlimax, Asterix's distant cousin, to go and get the magic potion that he knows about. And so it's a delivery service as they attempt to deliver this barrel of magic potion to this village to help them defend against the Romans. Obelix is delighted because the Romans have all gone off to Britain and he's bored because he likes thumping Romans, so there's none around. And the big change from the film, though, is that they don't take dogmatics. And if you've seen the film and know that he has quite a big role in quite a lot of the story, not having him present in the book, it feels like there's something missing. But otherwise, absolutely brilliant. And like Asterix and the Banquet, where they send up the various areas of France, Asterix in Britain is no punches held, send up of the British way of life, afternoon tea, weekends, the way we talk, the fact we boil food up until it's dead, and then some, and warm beer are the big key ones. Oh, mint sauce features a lot too. And rugby. Lots of great stuff. Very funny. Love it. Booktastic. And then I read something which had a bit more weight to it, and that was Raft by Stephen Baxter. This was from the library, and it's said to be book one of the Zeely sequence, arguably the series that Stephen Baxter is best known for. It's a series I've been desperately trying to get into. I've got several books from the series already, but every time I start it, I think I have no idea what's going on. Do I need to start from the beginning? And the OCD part of me that needs to read things in chronology said yes. So finally I managed to get hold of Raft. What's it about? Very difficult to say. My copy came with a preface by Alistair Reynolds, just giving you a little bit of lowdown about the book and saying stick with it because it doesn't make any sense until you get a certain point, and even then you're lucky. And so I'm really glad you did, because I would have given up quite early on thinking, nah, I've no idea what's going on. But as Reynolds will say, stick with it, so I've stuck with it, and really glad I did. Basically, it turns out that a ship of people, surprisingly enough, somehow slip through a fabric in time and space and end up in a different dimension or different universe where gravity is 1,000,000 times or 1,000,000,000 times, but lots of times more than they're used to. And they're trying to eke out a living in this new environment. I follow one character who's a star miner. He literally mines out the heart of dead stars. I think there's more to life than this. And this is like generations later, and the world that was and things that were has all been forgotten. And he goes on a little adventure to try and find out where they've all come from and where they're going, really. So a huge amount of imagination in this one, a huge amount of imagination needed to get a grip with it. I really enjoyed it. I found some of it did lose me a little bit, but that's me, not the book necessarily. And although considered to be a standalone of the series, it doesn't really feature anything to do with the Zeelies as far as I'm aware, although what caused them to fall through this gap in the first place wasn't ever ascertained. I'm glad I read it, so I can now press on with the rest. And it's a buy it, if I ever find a copy. After that was another library book, which was Rick and Morty Let the Rick One In. I think this is book 8 in the series. Not that really makes a difference because they're all random and zany, just like the TV show. And just like the TV show, there's a lot of humour in it. A lot of it lands, but a lot of it doesn't. Not much more to say to it than that, really. The artwork matches what's from the show. The characters are just as likeable or unlikable as from the show. Glad I read it. Wouldn't buy it, though. And then back to Asterix. So it's Asterix and the Normans. Probably my favourite of the series. Always love this one. Don't really know why particularly. I just really enjoy it. The Normans, who don't know the meaning of fear, want to go and find out what it is, because one of them's got the notion that fear makes you fly. Obviously, there's something lost in the translation there, because it's not quite the flight that they had in mind. Anyway, they find themselves on the Gaulish beach, where Asterix and Obelix are trying to get Vitus Assix's nephew from the city, just for kicks, to be more of a man. And of course, he is the king of being scared, and gets kidnapped by the Normans. And again, you got some puns with different naming. This time they will end in af. So you have Nescaf, Tim and a half, Riff Raff, and so on. And this also introduces the concept that Dogmatix doesn't like trees being harmed and bursts into tears whenever Obelix unwittingly or intentionally uproots or knocks over a tree. Booktastic. After that is Asterix the Legionary. And this one, Obelix falls in love. Pretty young thing called Panacea. But it turns out that she's already betrothed to another chap, Tragicomics, who happens to have been drafted into the Roman army. Not one to let a broken heart stop him, Obelix abruptly goes off to join the Roman Legion and find him. Asterix comes along too, and the two of them make life a living hell for their new instructors and leaders. And what really brings this up to an even higher standard is that their fellow enlistees hail from Egypt and Britain and what will become Germany. And so a lot of the puns and gags that we had in the books when they went to those countries return here and then some. So lots of brilliant entertainment. Booktastic. And the last one of these for this month is Asterix and the Chieftain's Shield. This one fully introduces the chief's wife, Impedimenta, and the chief is suffering from some liver trouble due to overindulgence in food. Asterix, Obelix and Dogmatix take him off to a health spa retreat to recuperate and go on a diet. And it just happens to be in the region where Vercingetorix, the great Gaulish chief, lays arms at Julius Caesar's feet, declaring the fall of Gaul to the Roman occupation. And our heroes take it into their heads to try and retrieve Vercingetorix's shield for their own chief. As the race gets the clock against the senior Roman, noxious vapours to find it first. The story itself is a little bit convoluted and there are some very happy coincidences that take place, but it's a hell of a lot of fun, like the rest of the series really. Booktastic. We then went on holiday for 2 weeks where we got to sit on the beach and read, and so I finally finished the book 3 of a trilogy I took last year to read and only managed to book 1 because it was so utterly thrilling, and that is book 3 of Star Wars The Black Fleet Crisis Tyrant's Test by Michael P. Kuby McDowell. Now, if you've seen some of my previous videos, I have waxed lyrical about how awful the first 2 were. I was determined to finish the series though. I did start this book back in February, but sitting on a beach with not too many distractions should have helped me finish it. And finish it, I finally did. Was it worth it? Of course it wasn't. So let's get the Arcana out of the way first. Big complaint about the first 2 was the terrible, terrible character of Arcana, who pops out of nowhere, turns up to Luke and claims to be knowing who Luke's mother is. Of course, this is before the prequels came out, but we all know who Luke's mother is. And these are on a wild goose chase. But you think, oh, maybe there's an ulterior motive here. There's some actual relevance to it somehow. But she's sulky, she's moody, she never answers any questions, and is a complete pain in the arse, the whole thing. Anyway, there's a big revelation here at the end where she confesses all, and it turns out that this awful, terrible character is even worse than that. So completely makes the first 2 books even more pointless than they already were. The adventures of Landar Calrissian on this spaceship that he'd stumbled onto, I suppose, has a slightly more interesting conclusion, but has taken far too long to get there, and I'd long stopped caring about the whole thing, to be honest, by that point. And then the big crisis itself, the Black Fleet crisis with the Verthans, that was sort of going on in the background somewhere. There was a big battle in the end and everything was sorted in exactly the same way that the issue against Grand Admiral Thrawn was sorted in the end of the Thrawn trilogy. Basically, the slave race that he was really horrible to turned on him and killed him. Yeah, that was kind of original and, yeah. Anyway, boring, just plain dull. Let's move on. After that, I then read Men in Black by Steve Perry. This is the novelisation of the film of the same name, starring Will Smith and Tommy Lee Jones. Now, I do like reading novelisations because they sometimes give you a little bit more insight behind the story. Things that were in the script that were changed for the screen get left in the book because the writing's already happened. They can't change it every time they change the script. And so what happens in the book is one version of the script, and what happens on the screen is another version. And so sometimes you get some nice little insights and deleted scenes or whatever that never made it to the final thing. So differences between the book and the film, not many. I would say this is perhaps darker, a lot more sweary. Not a huge amount more sweary, a lot more bloody. I mean, they went for the goo factor in the film. I would say it's more blood and guts than goo in the book. But for the most part, the book and the film are pretty similar. I think the biggest difference was near the end where there's an aerial bombardment from the fleet in orbit that does demolish a couple of cities. I mean, there's no escaping the fact that cities are Independence Day style. That never happens in the film. The heroes save the day before any demolishing happens. But in the book, they don't quite get there in time. It still ends in the same sort of way, but there are definitely things blown up. Really good. Enjoyed it. If you like the film, you like the book, worth reading. And finally, I read Star Wars: The New Rebellion by Christine Catherine Rush. And this was a reread. This was actually the first Star Wars book I ever read. So I got it out of the library. I wasn't going to. My wife said, why don't you try that? You like Star Wars. And I did. And now have sort of in excess of 400 Star Wars books upstairs, of which I'm about halfway through reading.
Sorry.
Now, this is a 533-page book, and right off the bat I shall say that compared to this book of nonsense, which took me since February to read, I read this in 2 days flat. In this one, a former student of Luke Skywalker turns to the dark side and tries to take over the galaxy, an idea that the Disney films didn't try to steal at all. And he does this in a cunning way by basically implanting a bomb into every single droid. It's been a long time planning, and of course he then decides to detonate them in places at once, and of course causes huge amounts of damage, having massively infiltrated everywhere. Really clever concept, and our heroes then have to try and save the day and stop this guy from doing the thing that he's doing. There's a side adventure featuring Lando Calrissian, who goes off after Han to try and stop him falling into a trap, and instead falls into his own trap. He's also got a bounty hunter on his head like Han did with Jabba, and falls out of that, and in turn needs rescuing by Han. And it also introduces a character who will become his wife. Absolutely loved this. Flew through it so quickly, I can't believe it. Buy it. There we go, those are books I have read. And on to the books I'm going to read in August. Now, bearing in mind, today is the 19th of July, and I've spent a further week on the beach reading, so some of the books I'll be waving at you I have already read. So first up is the book of the month, Poison, by Chris Wooding. This looks to be a fantasy book featuring a character called Poison as she goes in search of her missing baby sister who's been taken by the fairies and they left a changeling in her place. So that's one of those sort of adventure stories. No idea how it's going to play out, but I really enjoy Chris Wooding's work, and so looking forward to reading this one. And after that, I'm then going to read Andy McDermott's Empire of Gold, part of the Wild Chase series featuring Nina Wilde and Eddie Chase, as they go on another archaeological adventure to try and do a thing. And in this one, they're trying to find El Dorado. I mean, they've already found Atlantis and the Garden of Eden, Hercules' tomb, Excalibur. So El Dorado should be a walk in the park. But it would be if they weren't being chased by people who were trying to kill them. Lots of high-octane action and adventure, ridiculous chases and escapes, huge amounts of fun. Looking forward to it. And after that will be James Rowland's The Devil Colony. This is part of the Sigma Force series. Similar vein to the Wild Chase series, except I would say this is perhaps a little bit more intelligent, or at least it appears to be. And this one looks at the indigenous population of North America and a supposed lost tribe of settlers. Now, it's been a while since I've read any of the Sigma Force series. I'd lent, I think, this one to a friend, and while she had that, I was reading some of James Rowland's standalone books. She then returned it, and I was quite happy reading the standalone books, so I went through the rest of those. And so it's been a good while since I've read anything from the Sigma Force, so glad to return to it. And then after that, I'll then reread The Indwelling by Tim LaHaye and J.B. Jenkins. And this is book 7 of the Left Behind series, where the Antichrist has been murdered. That's the end of the previous book. And as the name suggests, is going to reawaken, but being occupied by the bad guy. Now, I really enjoyed the series when I first read it. It's been less impressive as a reread. I'm really hoping it picks up now that things are going to start happening. And if there's enough time, I'll then read The Flood by Stephen Baxter. I normally find them hard going, and this is a 500 plus page book, so it might be a bit of an ask to get this done by the end of the month, but I'll give it a go. Written in 2008, set in 2016. What with global warming and the change of weather patterns and flooding here and there and everywhere, he's writing a story about global flooding. So interesting to know his take on that. I'm also going to plough on with my Asterix collection. I'll say how many of those I can read. And I'm still reading The Walking Dead, The Fall of the Governor Part 1 while boiling the kettle. Well over halfway now. And to everyone else in the household, I am also reading stuff. So to the boys combined, I'm still reading The Light Fantastic by Terry Pratchett, book 2 of the Discworld series. They're really enjoying that one. To my youngest on his own, I'm reading The Edge Chronicles, The Curse of the Gloamgloser, which is part 1 of the Quint sequence by Paul Stewart and illustrated by Chris Riddle, and is chronologically the first of the series. He chose which order they get read in, not me. Not quite sure what it's about yet. Nothing's really happened yet, but certainly there's going to be some sort of curse at some point, possibly even by the Gloamgloser, which has been the big bad throughout the entire series. It hasn't really made much of an appearance. And to my eldest, I'm reading Lion Adventure by Willard Price. And to my wife, I am still reading Dune by Frank Herbert, in anticipation of the new film coming out soon. Seeing the trailers for it, looks really good. And having got just over halfway now, a lot of the beats of the trailer, we go, oh, recognise that, know who that is. So far the trailer is looking very accurate to the book. Really enjoying the book, but somebody keeps falling asleep, so getting through it is very slow. No reflection on the book, she's just tired. And there you go, that's quite a lot of editing to do, and this could be quite a long video. So have you read Asterix? Do you have a favourite? I'd love to know what your favourite is and possibly why. Have you never heard of Asterix? If not, why not? Give it a go. Doesn't matter which book you pick up, they're all brilliant. Most libraries have a copy and they're easily found in the children's section of the bookshop, but don't be afraid. Although aimed at children, there's something to be appreciated at any age. And if you have any other comments, then feel free to put them down below. But as usual, if you have nothing nice to say, then please keep them to yourself. Thank you, and until next time, see you later.